Many art and design schools push an anti-capitalist agenda that is the height of stupidity and is completely hypocritical. While these ideas sound good and are ideologically appealing, these ideas completely mislead students by pretending that capitalism isn't the backbone of both art and design worlds, and the disconnect between what is taught and the cold, hard reality is a huge failure in art education. This idea that money bad is stupidity and is a form of educational malpractice. Let me tell you why. So much of art and design education promotes an ethos that is a road to nowhere. Much of the discourse in the forms of art and design making prioritized in schools is in flagrant denial regarding the cold, hard realities faced by young designers and artists. Not only in some cases is the discourse about active disengagement from any form of market dynamic, but the forms of work that find favor within school settings go to great lengths to resist commodification. When I close my eyes and I think about what art and design look like today in many school settings, I see a Salvation Army run thrown into a wood chipper, literally, with the results strewn about the studio or about the canvas or about the page. Every time I go hard on the problems that I see in art and design education, I get absolutely roasted as a hater, or I get tons of comments about how can I attack art and design school, as if I'm letting the cat out of the bag or undermining the customer base. I don't know how much clearer to try to make this. I can be critical and still think that art and design school is an amazingly powerful educational experience. I think that with the right attitude, professors, culture, mentoring, and institution, these schools can be literally life-changing. That's why I'm making this video. The other reason that is that I don't truck in the shit that I'm about to criticize. I encourage my students to be strategic about their studio practice. I don't know how much clearer to try to make it. It is possible to love something deeply and use critical thinking to discuss its limitations. In last week's episode, I briefly discussed this issue, and let's take a quick look at that. A recurrent theme in many art and design schools for the past couple of years is a militant, nearly fundamentalist opposition to capitalism and the commodification of the work of art. You see this both in what's being explicitly taught, as well as the forms of art and design that are being made. I can't be more clear about this. This entire discourse is an exercise in stupidity and a form of educational malpractice. As a good friend of mine has said to me repeatedly, dogs work for treats. Now, in their quiet moments of disarming honesty, I do not know one artist who does not want the ability to sustain themselves from their work. This does not mean that late-stage capitalism is not predatory. What it means is that there are degrees, and that it is possible to make art and design ethically and to be able to sustain yourself from that practice. What follows is a very brief discussion of some related issues. The ideological basis for the problem has its roots and its heart in the right place. For good reason. Students are taught to challenge consumerism, reject commodification, and view artistic and design practices as vehicles for social critique, inspired by Dadaism, Surrealism, and Marxist thought. Now, while these critiques are important for questioning power and equality, they obscure the reality of how the art and design worlds function The problem is that, as with nearly everything in Western technological culture, what began as something good has lapsed into the realm of the absurd. It has become farce. So many professors are now literally teaching failure. The forms of art and design, the discourse and the ethos has become so detached from the underlying reality of life as an artist or designer outside of the ivory tower that failure is the only option. In the era before industrial capitalism fully developed, art was largely patronized by religious institutions, monarchies, and the wealthy elite. During this period, there were undercurrents of resistance to wealth disparity and the concentration of power. Some early works, particularly in religious art, question the pursuit of wealth, like Hieronymus Bosch's work critiques greed these critiques were often framed in spiritual rather than explicitly economic terms. The ideas of Karl Marx significantly influenced modern art, especially in movements that aligned themselves with worker struggles and socialism. The relationship between art and class became a central concern for many artists. Dadaism, Surrealism, and other avant-garde movements challenged bourgeois values, consumer culture, and capitalist exploitation. Dada rejected traditional artistic values, critiquing the commodification of art and the dehumanizing effects of capitalism. Russian constructivists made art to serve the proletariat and help build a socialist society. Mexican muralists like Diego Rivera used their art to promote Marxist ideals and to critique capitalism's role in perpetuating inequality. Now, while these critiques are important for questioning power and equality, in a contemporary context, they obscure the reality of how art and design worlds actually function. In a contemporary context, the problem is essentially all about hypocrisy. Contemporary art and design often critique capitalism while being deeply embedded within it. The art and design market, collectors, galleries, and museums are capitalist institutions, and many artists and designers whose work critiques capitalism find their work bought and sold in this system.
Did the gavel come down to mark the sale of Banksy's Girl with Balloon for a record $1.4 million? Did the picture start to slip out of its frame into shreds below? The anonymous artist claims to be behind the stunt. On Instagram, he posted a photo of his prank with the caption, going.
Anyone who believes that Sotheby's wasn't in on this is a fool. But more importantly, anyone who believes that Banksy is some anti-capitalist crusader that's not benefiting from the system, that is getting paid massive sacks of cash, is also a fool. Art objects, regardless of their ideological stance, are commodified and sold in the marketplace. Even anti-capitalist critiques, such as Banksy's works, are absorbed into the capitalist system with pieces selling for millions of dollars. Let's take a quick look at key themes in anti-capitalist art across periods. Alienation and exploitation. Artists depict the alienation of individuals in capitalist societies and the exploitation of workers. Commodity critique. Many artists critique how capitalism commodifies everything, including art itself. Class struggle, class consciousness, and resistance to bourgeois values are recurring themes. Utopian alternatives. Artists often imagine alternative utopian societies where art exists outside capitalist frameworks. But what are the contradictions? The art and design world's deep connection to wealth and capital often leads to contradictions in anti-capitalist critique, especially as art objects themselves become high-value commodities. The art world rewards spectacle, branding, celebrity, rather than resistance to capitalism. Works that are celebrated are often deeply embedded in the mechanisms of wealth and investment, contradicting the anti-capitalist ideals often promoted in schools. Educators often fail to address the paradox of teaching anti-capitalist ideals in fields where it is literally impossible to disentangle financial success with capitalist structures and professional viability. Teaching students the simple idea that if their work is sold, if money is exchanged for the work, that the work is tainted, is the height of stupidity and is corrosive. Why? For two reasons. One, precisely how is an artist supposed to sustain their studio practice? And two, because there is literally no artist or designer that I have ever met that would not love to be able to independently make their work, to have a sustainable studio practice, making the work that they love. So when your professor states clearly, insinuates, or teaches that your work is tainted by any exchange of money, they're teaching you how not to be an artist by destroying any possibility that you will have a sustainable studio practice. When confronted by this ethos, ask a simple question. Ask them, how am I to sustain my studio practice? Now, if you ever get a good answer or learn a way to sustain a studio practice without participating in the system, DM me and lay it out for me in excruciating detail. I'll be waiting.